Well, family, it's time that we sit down and we discuss something else. Now, I've been noticing lately that there is like a rise or an escalation in Black youth and the violence that they engage with. So many things have happened, and this isn't just teenagers, right? Usually you think maybe 18, 19, 17, they're rebelling, they're trying to find themselves. Mm-mm. These are kids. We're talking 14, 13, 12, 11 years old, and they're participating in these crimes, and they're so violent, right? They're so violent, and they're so just disturbing. And the part that really unsettles me isn't the fact that, they're engaging in violent crimes, because as we sit with this, right, we'll see that this is something that has happened over generations. The part that really gets me is how young they are, and then the frequency that it's happening. It's not like it's something that's happening once in a blue moon. It's happening often, and we're getting to the point where we see it on our phones, and at some points we were shocked and we were horrified, and now we're just scrolling past, and it's just another headline that's blurring into the other, hundreds of headlines that we've read. And I don't want to have this feeling and see what's happening and not sit with it and talk with you guys about what's taking place, because if we don't sit with this, we're just going to repeat a pattern, and it's going to keep happening and keep happening. And what I believe is that this definitely is something that we need to get control of. So, with that being said, welcome back to Black and Classic Podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Monet. And now, listen, if you're new here or if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, okay? Hit the subscribe button, share with a friend of a friend so you all can join in on the classic fam. And today we're definitely going to sit with this. We're not going to rush through this, and we're going to take accountability like a family.
Blackness, that black power, that black pushing them to identify with.
So it's time that we start naming this reality that we now live with, because it's gotten to a place where either we address it, like we're at that fork in the road where either we address it and do something or we do nothing. And I'm not someone that chooses to sit idly by and do nothing. We now have to ask the question, why are these children engaging in such violent acts of crime? And not just, your run of the mill stealing candy from the candy store, right? No, it went from, I remember the clip, but everyone thought it was so funny, where the kid stole, I think, his like parents or grandparents' car, and was like, I just wanted to do hood rat things with my friend, and ha ha ha, it's a funny little thing on the internet. But that then escalates, and now these kids are doing armed robbery. They're, getting so afraid that they're shooting and killing people, or they're taking guns to school to kill the bully who didn't like their shoes the other day, and they're killing their parents, and just doing all of these things at the tender age of 11, 12, and 13, even 14. And it's like, what's happening in the world, right, where this is what's becoming of our children? What space, what environment are we raising them in? And what we have to really get honest about is that children mirror what they see. So the behavior that's around them, the behavior that, us as a community, as their village, as their parents, whatever we show them is what they're going to show back to us, right? We need to accept that this is happening to our children, and then say, okay, where do we go from here? Because let me tell you something, I don't want to see this for our Black youth. I don't. It's frightening. It's frightening, the headlines and the things that you see and the way it just quickly derails. But again, if we stay silent, we reinforce that behavior and it starts to become something that's learned of, oh, well, this is okay. And it is not. But let me, like I said, we're going to sit slowly with this, okay? So, as I was doing research, I came across something called Children of the Plantation. Yes, y'all, I went back, okay? And history teaches us a lot of things. Specifically, what history teaches is that nothing is new under the sun, right? And for every cause, there's an effect. For every reaction, there is some sort of consequence in this thing, okay? So, as I was looking at that, there's this phrase, partus sequarium ventrum. Let me tell you something now. I probably pronounced that wrong. So I think it's Latin. Child, listen, I'm black. I don't know nothing about that. Okay. It could be French, child. I don't know. What I do know is it was a legal doctrine for children born basically into slavery, right? So their mother was a slave, whether they were born by, their mother was a slave, so their father was a slave as well, or if their mother was raped by their slave master. It was basically just saying a child born by a slave is born into slavery. That child is not born free because they were born. No, they're born into slavery. And again, a lot of those children were products of rape, brutality, violence, those types of things. And again, with that, I want to kind of put a pin in that. We'll circle back to that, but those were the children of the plantation. Now, so for those children, what ended up happening, especially if you know anything about um slavery times, right? And this goes all the way back to even the Roman Empire, even in Korea, what they were doing, what's happening now in our worlds and things that are being exposed. So there's a lot of trafficking of children. So children were bought and sold for labor, for other things, there was this trafficking of children, and a lot of it was for financial relief, financial gain, right? Some parents maybe were, too poor and they had to sell their children because someone else needed a worker or needed them for something else, and they wanted that child. And that, although we've seen that in the, Roman Empire and in Korea and like I think it was like 1000 AD or something like that. We see these things and you think, well, that was then. No, because it trickles down. Again, history will always repeat itself if you don't fight against it and try to, course correct. Okay. So we even see that in the crack epidemic, right? Where there's mothers who are like, I need to get high, I need my drugs. Sure, go do that strange thing for this little piece of change with my child. When there is that need of financial relief or financial gain by someone else, children are, what people use. We see that now, right? Especially like with the Epstein files and, things like that. Children are what they use. Okay. So, children were brought into this world, especially during slavery times, expected to work, expected to go out, whether they're at the plantation, whether they're working in the house, whether they're raising the other children, right? Like as they grow older, now they're taking care of the younger children that are coming in. It just was what it was. Let me tell you guys, as many slavery movies and documentaries and the things that Hollywood produces, I don't think we will ever have a clear picture of how horrendous those conditions were. So to then think about children growing up in those conditions, let me tell you, okay, it is scary to think about. It's just pure insanity. And there was this quote that I want to read. It said, though still not treated as equals, they face fear and hardships, hoping for a better future. And that was speaking directly about children. Children still were not seen, especially Black children, right? They still were not seen, or I would say enslaved children, because again, the Roman Empire and other places where they had slaves as well, enslaved children were still not seen as equals, even though you would think this is an innocent child. No. So that is a whole lot of chaos and confusion and, just madness that we have to understand, that enslaved children, specifically Black children now, right, have went through. And that's something that is still a part of our history and that we have to carry with us as we look at, how we've gotten into this super, super violent nature. Okay. If we look at our history, and if we take the time to understand that we had enslaved children, now we have emancipated children, and we have these slave masters who are still using these children and exploiting these children, which will be a little bit of foreshadowing for how, children in our modern, right, era are being exploited. But we'll slow down a little bit there. So we have these emancipated children who now move through the Jim Crow era, which was a whole nother, I mean, that's a whole nother rabbit hole you can go down with just the violence that was in and of itself. And then we move into the civil rights movements, which gave us the history of, the Little Rock Nine and Ruby Bridges and the different sit-ins and, Brown versus the Board of Ed. We had all these historical moments that surrounded children and surrounded um, how impacted children were by the environment that they were in. Again, this is now becoming trauma that's getting stored in our bodies, right? So we moved from being slaves, enslaved children, into emancipated children living in the Jim Crow era, then going into the civil rights movement. All of this, mind you, not even thinking about the trauma of being ripped and pulled from your native land. Hello? Okay, we didn't even touch that yet, right? So all of these different waves, different sets of trauma that's now being stored in the body, and what does that look like? How does that come out? You get what I'm saying? So we have all of that trauma stored in our bodies, and we get generations and generations of people. So then you have to think, who is raising these children now, right? Who is raising these children? And it's the people who had this same set of stored trauma, and they're passing it, and it's just becoming a transgenerational trauma where through different generations you'll see the same effects and the same like just, yeah, like the I can't think of the word right now, but you'll just see that, that common thread flowing through each generation because it's stored in the body. Now, I was reading maybe a few months ago, I was reading Angela Davis' book, and that is Woman, Race, and Class, I believe. Amazing book. Very, very good. Very eye-opening as well. um, yeah, I can discuss it at another time, but a very eye-opening book. And so she goes to break down this ideology, and she says, or she writes the following: examinations of the Black family during slavery have simply assumed that the master's refusal to acknowledge fatherhood among their slaves was directly translated into a matriarchal family arrangement of the slave's own making. Angel Davis continues in another passage, sharing the following: the systematic designation of slave men as boys by the master was a reflection of their inability to execute their fatherly responsibilities. So, what does that mean to us? What does that mean to us? It means that this breakdown in the Black family, oh baby, that started years ago. You understand? They knew how strong having a man around was. They knew, he said it. So we strip you of that. We pull that out of the home. So now the woman, right, takes shape as the head of the household. Now granted, this is enslaved time, so trust me, there was no head of the household, but that is the idea because again, over generations, right? My mama did it so I could do it. My mama made it happen so I could make it happen. It's just trauma in the body, and it helps you understand who's raising the children because this is just trauma in the body, and it's simply now manifesting, it's harvesting, and it's blooming all over the place. And to me, it's just weeds that are growing, right? We got to rip these weeds up. We can't keep letting these weeds come back year after year. They've got to go. You know what I mean? They have got to go. So when we look at this and we understand that they reference Black men as boys to make them seem less than, they wanted the Black man out of the home so the woman could step in place, so there was no fatherly structure. You kind of understand how all of this trauma gets stored in the body and how history keeps repeating itself. So now we don't have, especially in the household, mom and dad raising a child. Now, granted, please, before people get to telling me about how they came up in a two-parent household and it was lovely, babe, I understand. What I'm talking about is just, you understand what I mean? The bigger picture. I don't want your one story. I really want to look at the broad picture because to me, this is where we have to understand, like I said, where we are so we can get somewhere differently. This shit ain't nothing new under the sun. They've been doing this. This has been the goal. Been the goal, right? Let's understand that so we can choose to do something differently and be there for our children. Now, I spoke about transgenerational trauma. It comes in two. It's a psychological and a physiological, right? Meaning that one will really be like in your mind and your emotions, and the other will be in your body. I think that looks like a lot of health issues. I think that looks like a lot of people, right? When people are like, oh, Black men need therapy and things like that. All of that to me is a transgenerational trauma thing, right? Where we always kind of have these same high blood pressure and diabetes and stress and all those different things, like, you just, it's a common thing, right? Because to me personally, I think it's just a generational thing, right? It's just a generational trauma that's just being cycled down, down, down. And I think when we look at the violence in children, when you're thinking about the enslaved child, the emancipated child, then you have just the different eras of a Black child and what we've seen over different generations. Violence has always been there. So this isn't to say that they're not going to know violence. It's always been there. It's always been in our history, right? It's always been in our story. The violence has always been there. So that's not something that's unfamiliar to the body. It's not, right? It's kind of like, you ever, now mind you, me, probably most of my audience, law abiding citizens, okay? We are law abiding citizens, but that doesn't mean a cop gets behind us and we get hot up under the pits, okay what I'm saying? We start, you know what I'm saying? Let me, tighten, get your grip of the whip, you know what I mean? Like, and it's not every single time, but we have had those moments where we might tense up a little bit. Why is that? If you a law-abiding citizen, they never did nothing to be a nobody jailhouse, you know what I'm saying? Why do you tense up? Okay. You get what I'm saying? Okay. I just think there are certain things like that that, it's just a part of, I don't wanna say our DNA, but it's just a part of the fabric that makes you a Black American specifically, And I think that begins with the transgenerational trauma and understanding, again, slavery, Jim Crow, all of these different things, right? It's like when like if you go somewhere and you see like a Confederate flag, you like, "Ooh, do I need to do I need to leave? What's going on right here?" Like, it's certain things where I've never experienced it, right? But I understand, like, something in me that resonates. It resonates, and now I feel it. That to me is a transgenerational trauma, and it's something that is in the babies as well. And unless we as the village and as the parents address that, as the adults that are raising these children, then we're going to keep having the same thing happen over and over and over again. And it happens over and over. And then I discovered, oh, well, there's a term for that, epigenetics. So, epigenetics research suggests that it's trauma that can alter the gene expression that survivors inherit by by offspring, right? So, a woman has a baby, her, genetic trauma that's in her body is then passed to her offspring, epigenetics. I was like, "Okay, okay, I'm onto something here. I'm onto something here." So I do believe that, um that feeling that resonates with us, it's a genetic thing, right? It's epigenetics. I learned that. Okay, you guys look into that because for me, it was very reassuring, right? That like there is something to this, right? That our children aren't just out here um wild and without reason. There is a reason, and I think again it's our history, right? Violence has lived here, so we can reasonably conclude that this violence didn't just poof come out of nowhere. Oh, it's the video games, it's the iPads. No, it's our history, and we've had a long time with this. But what we must do is we must not neglect the babies anymore, because neglecting them will lead to chaos, and we have to make sure that we are supervising the babies. We have to make sure that we are intentional. Sometimes y'all know these words don't like to come out. We are intentional about raising them, because as the adults, right, as the people who claim responsibility for the children, for the youth, for our future, we have to understand that they are internalizing and dealing with a lot of things that we also have dealt with, our parents have dealt with, our grandparents have dealt with, our great great grandparents have dealt with. It's a trauma that's generation after generation. That does not mean that it continues to live in us. Okay. That does not mean that the trauma has to continuously be passed to our offspring. We can wake up to this, especially if we can call it out. If we can call it out and acknowledge it, we can change it, right? Because we got babies making grown decisions, doing things that adults shouldn't do, but have done, right? At age 11, age 12, that's not good. That's not good. And it's not fair for those children because, to be fair, we have, underdeveloped parents raising underdeveloped children. And it's in, environments that are less than what we deserve. But it's continuing a cycle that's not fair for us and not fair to us to have and to keep being in the middle of it. So I want us to kind of sit with that and really understand what that looks like. And here is the real tea, right? When we're taking a look at what that looks like, we got to be honest. There is an extreme harm in being gentle and also being disconnected. Okay. When I say disconnected, I want to start there. When I say disconnected, I mean we no longer have a village, right? We no longer have community. And it's not that the village or the community doesn't want to be there. They've been pushed away. They've been pushed away because parents are now in this weird place, okay? This really weird place of trying to be the friend, trying to be the homie, trying to be too cool. Parents nowadays can't take correction. They can't be told they're wrong. And it's a real weird place. Parents are, like, isolating themselves and, especially now if you're thinking about single parents, right? Like I said, we just talked about it with Angela Davis in her book and where it says, the slave master knew, "Hey, we don't want this father figure, this fatherhood happening. Those are boys. Those aren't men, those are boys. Leave the women to be the one to run the household," right? Essentially, that's what we're getting at. So, you have single parents stretched thin, drained, trying to raise two, three, four, five, six, seven kids, all by themselves, whether it's mother or father at this point. And then they don't want to turn to community. They don't want to turn to their village. They don't want to rely on teachers. They don't want to rely on, the neighbor down the street to help out. They don't want to rely on that. They want to believe they got it all right and they're doing it perfect and can't nobody tell them nothing. And so what happens is, again, you're pushing away the village, you're pushing away the community. So now when they see your child cutting up and acting a fool, not my child, not my problem. Right? So now when, little John John is getting arrested and you crying and boo-hooing, everyone looking at you like, girl, please, or when something happens to your child, it's people like, "Well, I mean, he was out." You know what I mean? There's no sympathy or support, or there aren't a lot of people wrapping their arms around you because you didn't want to take the correction to get shit right when it was happening. So now that the bad thing happened, well, everyone's like, "Oh, well." And that's a fucked up place to be in. That's a really fucked up place to be in because children being disrespectful and being wild and talking back and I mean trying to fight teachers and all this other stuff, that used to be unacceptable. I'm not that old and I remember when it was unacceptable to do that. To talk back, excuse me? Child, we couldn't even say certain words that weren't cuss words. Do y'all remember? Hello? We couldn't say lie. Okay? Like, you had to make sure when you walk into a room, you greet everybody. Now, kids, they have their headphones on. They walk into one room, sit down, don't say a word to nobody. And all of that at some point was unacceptable. Now it's the norm. And now no one, again, not my child, not my problem. Why am I gonna say something to Miss Sharon when Miss Sharon gonna cuss me out from now till tomorrow? Because I'm trying to tell her that little John John bad and he up here screaming and cussing everybody else out. Not my child, not my problem. So now the village doesn't want to be involved and you lose community and you're by yourself and you're tired and you're strained and there's no one around to help. And one of the greatest things that you could do, I would think, is ask for help. Get help. Let someone embrace you. Let someone wrap their arms around you. Because when you're disconnected and you're trying to do this thing called life by yourself, it's not easy. It's not easy. So we cannot believe that raising a child disconnected from the things that we need, the people that we need, the support that we need is easy. It's not. And we need to get back to understanding how to have that village and how to have that community and how to trust the teachers and the neighbors, because they are a part of your village to help you raise this Black baby. Now, quick story, because this just further proves my point. I mean, you can't get no better than this, right? So I'm on TikTok and I'm seeing a lot of reactionary videos. And people are like, "Oh, the mom's crazy. The teacher was right." Blah blah blah. I said, "You know what? Let me go find out what everybody talking about." Okay, so of course, if you've been on TikTok, you can click the little search bar. Boom, it'll bring you up to the video that's going viral. Easy, right? I click on the video. So, long story, very less long. There was a mother who received a notice from the teacher saying that the child's penmanship wasn't great for their age. And, just like basically being like, hey, we need to get your child caught up. Here's what we got to do. But where she is, not looking too good. The mother, extremely offended. Extremely offended. She then goes, gets a pencil and writes a note to the teacher. Words spelled wrong. First of all, it's already in pencil, crazy. Words are spelled wrong. Her handwriting, atrocious. And it made you realize, oh, the apple does not fall too far from the tree. And that's the problem, right? Because here's my thinking, right? The same thing probably happened to the mom when she was in school. When she was in school, there probably was a teacher who pulled her mom aside and said, "Hey, yeah, Lil Tasia gonna need some extra help. Okay, you might want to buy this booklet. Maybe 30 minutes a day after school, we can get her together." Mom probably said, "You don't know about my child. My child is smart. My child is this, and you can't tell me nothing about my child." So she went. Teacher said, "Okay, hey, say no more. They don't pay me enough to fight with you. Clock it. They don't pay me enough to fight with you. Say no more, girl." Okay, so daughter go through school, clearly still can't write worth a damn. Now she got a baby. And when she gets a baby, guess what she do? Because she saw her mom, remember what I said? Children mirror what they see. Yeah, she saw her mom carry it that way, so she does the same. All in all, setting a little baby up for failure. Setting a little baby up for failure. Now, because the internet did drag her very good, they dragged her very good. Sometimes your village does need to drag you on down and bring you back down to earth and say, "Hold on, sweet sis. This might not this might not be the stand you want to take. Go ahead and get that baby some classes. Go ahead and get that baby the letter book so she could write out her letters with the little dotted lines. Go ahead and do that, because if your handwriting is any evidence to what hers looks like, my God, today, she needs some help." You understand what I'm saying? And that's the importance of the village, to get you together. She wanted to be so angry that someone would dare tell her that she's not a good parent. Someone offering you correction is not them trying to pass judgment, it's them trying to help you, right? That is the important part. We can't confuse someone trying to correct you with being judgmental. No, they're just trying to get you together. If I want you to be the best that you can be, I'm going to have to offer you some correction. I am. If I want the Black community to be better, I have to offer correction. It's no judgment. It's absolutely no judgment. But in order for you to get better, here's what you have to do. Now, are you willing to accept that? Or do you want to continuously sit in your dysfunction? Because, I mean, listen, babe, if you want to sit in your dysfunction, all is well, but everybody else is going to leave you there. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave you there, because I think at some point people are gonna, at that fork in the road, we're gonna go the way of like, we gotta do something different. We gotta do something different. We can't be like the TikTok mom mad because the teacher said our child's handwriting isn't the greatest. Like, that's what you're mad about? You're mad at the teachers. The teachers faced backlash from the parents, and then the parents refused to do any correcting to the child. And God forbid you ask a parent to correct their child. In this 2026, absolutely not. We're now in a place of gentle parenting. Let me tell you something. There needs to be a big conversation around gentle parenting, because I think as we get older, we're going to see just how bad the children raised under this gentle parenting are. Oh, it's going to be bad. Now, gentle parenting is something in my research that I found has been around for quite some time, since about the 1920s. It's just evolved a lot. So we're looking at the early roots, and the early roots started around the 1920s to the 1950s. Dr. Alfred Adler introduced respectful, non pampering child rearing, followed by Dr. Magda Gerber's work in the 1940s and the 1950s, focusing on respecting infants. Then we had positive parenting in the 1980s. Dr. Jane Nelson's positive discipline in the 1980s further built on these foundations. Then comes the modern era. The modern era in 2015 to present started with author Sarah Oakwell Smith, who coined the specific term gentle parenting in her books, with the movement growing significantly during the pandemic on social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram. And the core philosophy of gentle parenting is the approach focuses on empathy, understanding, boundaries, and respectful communication rather than punishments or rewards. And you guys, to be fair, I'm not against empathy and loving your child. I'm not against it. My problem with it is we're losing some structure. Okay, we've come to a place where discipline is looked at as cruelty, right? Looked at as malicious. No, kids need structure. They need boundaries. They need rules. They need guidelines. You know what I mean? They need those things. Okay, so when we get to a place of just totally removing that type of structure, guess what happens? It gets a little chaotic. It gets a little bit crazy. I think we've swung just a little too far to the left, okay? And now we're having this generation where they no longer respect authority. They don't respect rules. They don't understand consequences, because there's just never genuinely been a consequence for their actions, because they did something when they were young and they were told to breathe through it. And we understand our bodies are full of anger, and all our bodies are. Listen to me, okay? Absolutely not. Okay. I used to work in a daycare, and let me tell you something. I love the babies, okay? I love the babies. But all that gentle, soft talking and making sure they're okay, mm-mm, it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work, okay? Sometimes you gotta get the mommy voice on. It's gotta be a little stern. You know what I mean? We can't continue to gently raise these kids in chaotic worlds, you know? We cannot do it. Especially not no black child. Okay, please. We need to be able, as parents, as a village, as a community, start getting back to some discipline, consequences, punishment. Again, that does not equal cruelty. That does not equal abuse. But you can still be disciplined without it equaling abuse. You follow me? That is still possible. But nowadays, parents are at this like hands off approach. The child is tearing up stuff, ripping stuff to shreds and beating on people and biting and doing all this stuff, and it's like, "Oh no. Social media has told me I have to be gentle, so I have to talk very softly and make sure our bodies are calmed down before we discuss the thing." All of that is not going to work once we step out into the real world. That's not going to work. That's very harmful because consequences are a real thing. Authority is a real thing. Rules are a real thing. When you're a child, they're rules. When you're an adult, they're laws. These are real things. We cannot just gentle parent our way into having a healthy child. You know what's healthy? A yin and a yang, a right and a wrong. You know what I mean? Understanding that. But this whole gentle, I only look at empathy and feelings, it's not going to work. Okay? And it won't work because the parents are young, the grandparents are even younger. And now we have parents who lack emotional maturity, and their emotional maturity hasn't caught up with the responsibility of raising a child. A lot of them don't even understand that raising a child is a responsibility because I don't even really want to say it, but y'all treat children like they're accessories, like they're just little things that you just have around the house, you know? And no, that's a whole life that you're bringing into this world. Like that should carry some weight, you know? But we have people, parents who are very immature raising children, and I just don't see how it would be healthy to raise a child from a place of not even understanding the weight and the responsibility of it. And so what does that then produce? That then produces children sitting in front of screens. That's how you get these iPad kids. That's how you get these kids who are always on, social media, on YouTube. They're learning their social behaviors from, the algorithms. They're learning language and how to talk from music videos and from rap songs and from, just everything other than the parent, the village, the people around them. Everything is coming from the internet. And we already understand that adults cannot handle the internet. So, how do we assume that the child is going to handle the internet? The parent is the first teacher, the very first teacher. So, the way in which you as a parent behave, the way that you carry yourself, how you talk to other people, how you talk about yourself, how you talk about your loved ones, how you talk about your child, they are learning all of that. How do you treat the people in your life? How do you treat your loved ones? Right? How do you speak about your life? How do you speak about their life? You're teaching them that in your actions. So if you don't understand that responsibility, if you don't get some emotional regulation, if you don't get some conflict resolution, if you don't understand how to be accountable for yourself as a person, then what do you think you are teaching to this child that's following and watching your every move? All of these good, positive things, they just don't magically appear in a child. You can't gentle parent your way into having those things be in a child. You have to show that to them. It's very, very important that you show that to them because they have to learn that. It has to be modeled. And then it has to be instilled so that they mirror it and so that kids absorb that and become that. But if we run our lives like a love and hip hop show, then guess what our child's gonna do? And guess what our child's gonna think is healthy? Yeah. Yeah. So children are growing up around adults who are still figuring themselves out, still trying to figure out what they got going on and who they want to be. Very confusing for a child. Very confusing for a child. Not to mention, they then are stuck in front of computers and TVs and YouTube shows where the world and everything up in it is extremely violent, is extremely sexual, is extremely graphic, is extremely vulgar, right? That's the world that they're living in. Now, that brings me to the incidents that kind of sparked this whole thing, okay? Now, this first incident happened quite some time ago. So in Chicago, I'm going to kind of like speed through this story. There was a mother of a child who was being bullied. Every day on his walk home from school, he was bullied. So the mother said, "You know what? I'm going to walk up to the school. I'm going to get you from the school and walk you home." Sounds like a good mother, right? I'll step in and take you home, okay? Mother gets to the school, they get a few feet from the school. Guess what happens? Those bullies arrive, and not only do they then bully the child, they attack and beat up the mom. Children did this. Now, that's crazy, right? That's crazy. But here is where it got crazier for me. There was then a family friend, member, I don't know. There was someone who was related to one of the children who was one of the bullies who got onto social media. I do believe it was Facebook. They got onto social media to mock the mother, to just spew such vile things and with such hostility, and basically being like, their kid didn't do nothing wrong. She don't see the problem with it. If anybody got something to say about it, they could come see her, and just F these people here, this, that, and the third. And I was appalled. I was fully disgusted because that there is the problem. When adults model disrespect, children will repeat it. They will think that is a normal thing to do. To be dead ass wrong and still be disrespectful in being dead ass wrong, they're going to mirror that behavior. They're going to mirror it. So not only did you do this thing of fighting and attacking a mother who's trying to protect her child, you then have someone a part of that bullies community, that bullies village, who condones the behavior, reinforces the behavior, reinforces that mind state that, yes, this is what we should be doing. This is how we should behave. That is crazy. And so when adults decide that they want to excuse harmful behavior to the child and to others, we're excusing that behavior. Children learn to have an entitlement to violence, an entitlement to anger. And mom and them had a poor village as well. That's why I want to pull everybody in, come around the table. Let's talk about this because we can no longer excuse this bullshit ass behavior. Respect your children enough, respect yourself enough to not behave like that in front of a child, to not condone poor behavior. Maybe the child does feel away because now the internet is on their ass about being a bully. But guess what? That's a consequence to your action. We don't have to condone things. We can understand. I understand you feel sad now, but that's called a consequence. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. Now, this second incident happened in Miami. And this one was very disturbing, very disturbing. So, I'm going to try to take my time with this just to explain it well enough without sitting and just the ugh, it's just okay. A 12-year-old girl was walking home from school, and there was a group of boys who approached her. It was 13, 12, and I believe 14, right? They approached her, they dragged her in between an alley, they held her down on like a couch that was there, and they proceeded to, okay, you can fill in the blanks because YouTube is very, very sensitive and they will take anything down and it won't be seen. Okay. So they proceeded to write. Now, one of the boys, when the girl started to yell and started to try to scream, one of the boys, they have not said which one, put rocks in her mouth, like scooped up gravel and put it in her mouth so she could not scream. Right. Now, this to me really was a catalyst for this video because this to me is so horrific. So horrific that I just can't compute what gets you to that point. Again, in my mind, behaviors are mirrored, they are, seen and then acted out. So, to me, there has to be some sort of seeing this, so now I'm doing it. But what I also must say is that these aren't grown men. These are not grown men, these are children. They were born in 2011, they were born in 2012, and they were born in 2013. Right. These are babies. So the deeper question for me is, how did they get there? Because that level of cruelty, it just does not appear overnight. It's not something that you wake up and you're like, this is what I'm going to do today. No, that is something that has been seen. That is something that has been, I don't want to say condoned, but it's been something that has become a normalcy for those boys. One of them, all of them, however you look at it, it is a normalcy. It is something that does not seem awful and wrong for whatever reason. And when you don't, especially if you don't have a village or a community or you're not listening to the teachers, right? It begins to create a curiosity in a child. It begins to feel like, oh, this is something that I should be doing. And that is so dangerous. And that's the same thing with our incident in Chicago, right? It seems like the family member who came out to do this live on Facebook or whatever, they probably been fighting up and down streets and getting into all these different violent situations. So, and it's probably multiple kids, right? So when they do that, it doesn't seem like a bad thing. Because just the other day, they mama and they auntie was fighting and punching on each other. And, oh, they was at the store and mama didn't like what the cashier said. So she slapped the cashier. Like, you're living in a world of all of this violence. And so when you go out as a little baby, you only portray what's been mirrored to you. And that's just not fair. On top of already carrying all of this generational trauma that has just flowed through us, just generations of violence, of violence, of violence, of violence. But we're not actively in the kids' lives. We're letting the TV raise them, we're letting the music raise them, we're tapping in at the very last minute. Very last minute is when we want to tap in. Whether it's a headline, whether the crazy, horrific crime has started, we tap in at the very last minute. So now these violent crimes and these different cases, they increase, they rise. It happens more and more and more and more and more because we wanted to be hands off. No one could tell us nothing. No one could enter into our worlds and say, hey, maybe you should think about doing this. I see your child's doing that. Maybe you should think about this. Oh, no, no, no. Don't tell me nothing. I know what I'm doing. And clearly, we don't. We need help. We need each other. We must realize that. When something happens once, okay, cool. It happens once. We grieve it and we move on. When it keeps happening, okay, now we have a problem. Now we have something that we need to address. Now we understand we might be failing somewhere along the way. Something is going wrong because we keep meeting these kids at the end. We're meeting them at the crime scene, whether they were the perpetrator or the victim. We're meeting them at the end. Well, we should be catching them at the beginning, at the birth. Why are we meeting them at the end? And the end is so early. The end is so early, a little too early for my liking, if we're being honest. But no one wants to be honest anymore. No one wants to be honest because no one wants to be told that they're doing a wrong thing or that they're failing. And, consequences are hitting after the fact. And because we've been so far off, we don't want to realize we're not doing the right thing. I even saw there was I watch a lot of true crime, y'all. Please forgive me. But there was a case where this son had killed his friend as well as his friend's like girlfriend. And the mother of, the murderer, right, went on Facebook again. Facebook, listen, okay, y'all know about the Facebook Lives. Went on Facebook Live to taunt the family of the young girl that was killed. Basically being like, you're white, that's why you got the justice, and my son didn't do anything wrong just because your white daughter got killed. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah, your son, no. Your son was doomed from the beginning. With you as a mom, he was fucked from the beginning. He had absolutely no chance. No chance in hell. He had no chance. And that's a sad realization. That's a sad realization. But hey, as a parent, it's up to you to do that assessment and say, am I giving my child the best I can give them so that they can be the best human that they can be? And if you are not, go ahead and figure it out. Talk to the teachers, talk to your village, talk to your community, see what you need to do because we can't keep letting this happen. We can't keep letting this happen. There's a big disconnect and we're losing them. We're losing them. Okay? And we need to be able to understand what's happening. And if as a parent you're the problem, then hey, take accountability. No judgment here. No judgment here. I don't have judgment. I think my sympathy and my empathy for the situation is so high that I can't even judge you. I just want you to get better. I just want you to get better. If you need us, right? If you need us as a village, tap somebody on the shoulder and say, I need help. Because you can't do this in isolation. We cannot parent and raise no child in isolation. You need help. And we can't keep meeting these kids at crime scenes and meeting them either in a body bag or behind jail bars. No, not when they're starting to commit crimes like this at 12, 13, 14. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We need to get involved and we need to figure it out fast. Fast. So what do we do? Well, the first thing that I can say is we stop pretending that this is somebody else's problem. This is no longer anybody else's problem. I've signed, sealed, delivered it to your front door. It's your problem now. It's our problem now. As a community, we see it and it's time to address it. There is no need to continue to rant and rave about the white man. Cool. He's done his part. Now it's time for us to do ours. We know what's happening. We know what is taking place. We know why it's taking place. And if we sit idly by, the devil loves that. Oh, he loves an idle mind, you know? He's going to come in and tap dance and do whatever the fuck he feels like it. So now it's time for us to tell him, hey, it's time for you to go. We've seen enough. It's time for you to pack your bags and to get out. Because now we're going to come back and we're going to be unified. We're going to be a village. We're going to have community. We're going to understand that someone pointing out where we might need some correction is not them judging us, being mean, attacking us, saying that we're less than. No, it's just calling us up to be something better. I'm not putting you down, I'm pulling you up. And with that, family, thank you guys so much for listening. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to Black and Classic Network. And I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.